Hi, everyone, and welcome to Reigniting Small Business, the podcast from Spark Business Institute. Today, I'm here with Patrick Lee and our guest, Tracey Snyder, the Executive Director of Caroline County's Chamber of Commerce. And we're going to be discussing the critical roles chambers can play in the support and promotion of local businesses. So welcome, Tracey.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here and to be a part of Spark Business, and hopefully we can have a great conversation today.
So, Patrick, let's talk briefly about the function chambers should be performing and what you've seen that makes Tracey and her work with the Caroline County Chamber of Commerce unique.
Okay. I'm actually very excited to have met Tracey recently and found out about what she was doing at the Caroline County Chamber. As you all have seen in many of our podcasts and many of the discussions and content coming out of Spark, we have a very specific concept of a role that chambers can play in uniting small business communities, igniting the sustainable economic model for local communities. And we've seen a lot of what I consider to be sort of tired methodology, the standard networking, get people in the room, they're all hawking their cards, looking, to make a sale, not necessarily looking to figure out how to collaborate or come together. And we've used a lot of examples. And one of the projects that we had taken on is that we were working up in Baltimore City with a couple chambers up there and some of the economic development folks up there, trying to create a whole nother platform being driven by the chambers for uniting and educating small business owners. And it was a interesting experience trying to make that happen. What really fascinated me when I met Tracey is when I started talking with her, the very first thing is that a lot of the ideas that we had been trying to convince people were worth trying, she's already incorporated into the Caroline County Chamber and has been successful with it. And her innovations, in some ways, are even ahead of where we were trying to go. So I really quickly, number one, decided to join the Caroline County Chamber. But number two, I wanted to get Tracey on here so that she could talk to this a little bit. So to get started, Tracey, let's just start with, what is your vision of what a chamber's function is and what they should do?
Well, my vision as a new executive director, without having past experience as an executive director for a chamber, was to do all we could to create unity and a strength within our community, but also within our region by enabling these businesses to be out in the forefront, not just at after hours events, but through many different unique opportunities and ideas that we have come up with over this past year. So my idea for the chamber is to build commerce, to actually have businesses be glad they're in the chamber and that they are better for it because of all the different innovative ways that we are offering to bring them to the front of everybody's mind. So okay, I think that's...
And so you said, you don't have background in administration of chambers. So what is your background and how did you come to this role?
Well, I was telling Laura, I think there's three pivotal jobs that I've had that brought me here. One, I ran a Mary Kay business for myself for 13 years, became an executive senior sales director, earned 5 cars, 3 diamond rings, did $300,000 unit club and had a couple of offspring. And that was, I think, very vital in just direct sales and just learning to work with customers and women and different people. And then I went into advertising with the radio for a short bit and then did my own publication with horses for 5 years with no real background in, I had 6 months at the radio and was selling ads, and then everybody kind of jumped on board with the magazine. And we did that for 5 years. And I think I told you and Laura, I wish I'd have known about the Chesapeake think tank, because it probably would have helped me, because being a sole proprietor doing all things, you do get caught up in that circle of never being able to get bigger than what you really want to be. And then I went to retail, brick and mortar, jumped in for a year at Polo as an associate, then was hired as an assistant manager for VF Outlet. And then in 1 year after that, I was a store manager for 3 years with them. And then I decided to apply for this job, thinking that the marketing, the direct sales, understanding and working with big corporations, understanding and working with small businesses, and more importantly, what the magazine did for me was I built relationships with small businesses all over our region. And some of them are members of our chamber to this day because of that relationship. So that's what brought me to this job. I had no idea if they would hire me, but they did. And I was very excited to take on the role.
I think what's interesting about that, Tracey, is a lot of what you, how you describe those experiences. You're very entrepreneurial, and in addition to having all these different, work-life backgrounds, and I think that you bring a lot of that sense of excitement that entrepreneurs have for their business to the chamber, which is so refreshing, so new, and it's like you've woken up a sleeping beast and reinvigorated it. And it couldn't be a better time for you to do that than right now.
And that I do agree with, because I have, I think that the days of what a chamber used to do are over. We just can't stay in that place. We must advance to help our businesses in a better and more advantageous way than just having you listed in a directory and going to a mixer every now and again when your schedule meets, when it meets your schedule. Because I find typically at those mixers, while they're helpful, there's always about the same people there. So it's you kind of have to move out of that, or you're just really in a social club. So that is my thought. It was my thought on that.
So one of the things that was intriguing to me is you mentioned that you had created some sales opportunities. You were talking to businesses, and I believe this was related to the magazine, but I'm not certain. But it might have been radio. But you had said that you would go to businesses that couldn't necessarily afford the advertising, but by teaming them up with other businesses as a unit, they could afford that. Well, I think that's a very unique and telling way of how you bring small business together to advocate as a unit, and obviously should work with the chamber in some way, I would guess.
I agree with that, and that is on our agenda to look at, because things like, for example, one of the businesses that we want to help, which is a nonprofit, is our oh my gosh, all of our historical societies, right? They are nonprofit. They work on very little budget, but if we could bring them all together as one group and actually bring them in as one member under one group, then we can support something that is extremely important to our community, and that's our historical society. And so I've brought that to their attention. They seemed very interested in us combining them. And then we had COVID hit and things they're not really open, right? So right. As soon as we can open them, that's our next step. And I do agree. I think that however innovative we can be to bring the right businesses together to create a unit, and it helps all of them, then it's a good way to look at things.
Yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, go right ahead. Go right ahead.
No, I was gonna say, another example of you innovating along those lines is around that nonprofit piece, because you actually realize that nonprofits are playing a role in the community just as businesses are. And as a chamber of commerce, those nonprofits affect the climate out there, the standard of living for the area you're in and all. And you've come up with sort of a unique offering for nonprofits in your chamber also.
Correct. It's called the Caroline Nonprofit Network, and there's two key things they have to meet in order to be a part of the nonprofit network. One, they must be a member of the chamber. They cannot be a part of the nonprofit network without being a chamber member, because I can't necessarily help non-members. That's, we need our members to support us as well as we support them. And they need to be nonprofit. So with those two key ingredients, we brought together 18 nonprofits. We do unique things such as hands and feet days where we give back once a quarter. Also, our businesses offer their expertise, such as digital marketing, different things we offer to them because they're not always afforded that in their budget. And so the idea of the nonprofit is we get our members, some large businesses, some small, to adopt and select one of the nonprofits as their own, where they'll share on social media what that nonprofit's doing. Their team will collectively help that nonprofit, whether that's collecting a donation, supporting them with hands and feet or whatever it is, and they kind of marry together so that they can support them. And I believe it's when you do that, instead of asking the head of a business to just donate money, if you have their team donate, now it's a team effort. Now everyone's involved. They support it. They want to see the nonprofit do well. So that's really the premise of the nonprofit network. And I'm excited about it because it really has brought these nonprofits to the forefront, and we've created some real good partnerships.
And another piece of that I will point out again is the idea of that combined resources. Instead of the nonprofits feeling like they're competing against each other for money or resources or knowledge or volunteers, they're actually united in how those things get dispersed, and they're able to minimize the costs individually, because if there's a cost shared, it's less than if each one of them has to take on that same cost overall. So I think that's a great example of how those type of teamworks can work.
And I would just add also, one of the things when we created when the nonprofit was created, and we sat in a room and we discussed what the vision was for this, their first line of needing help is that nonprofit network, right? All of those nonprofits are there to support each other. And therefore, if they need help, I tell them, they're your first line. Let's reach out to each other and see what we can do. And then we'll reach out to the businesses and see what they can do. And then hopefully those businesses will reach out to their families and bring them in and say, we're helping His Hope Ministries. I want my kids to help. I want my family to help. So that's the idea and the concept. And the first year was good, and then COVID, and now we're kind of, we're pivoting, but it's going to come back really strong, and we haven't forgot about each other, and we are helping each other even as this happens through COVID.
So Tracey, you brought up COVID, and I think, that's another, something else we should talk about. How has the pandemic impacted your programs, and in what ways have you shifted to kind of work in support of your business members during this transition or difficult time?
So we were affected, I'd say 2 months in, the chamber kind of was affected really hard because everybody else was affected, and membership is a key thing for us. And our programs that we did in person, we kicked off the year with such success. We had new member meet and greet scheduled all year. So when you were a new member, you got to be welcomed in, because I feel like our partners in our chamber are a group unto themselves, and they support each other, and they want to support the new members. We want the new members to feel welcome. And so we had breakfast at the Best Western, and we had 40 people there. And then we did our Women in Business Network, and we had breakfast at 9 Central Diner in Ridgely, and we had 40 women there, and things were going good. And then everything kind of halted. So we shifted first by just getting information out to our small businesses, anything that could help them, any information that they needed. We just started shifting to being more online and reaching out to them and seeing, what do you need? What can we give you? What can we do? We increased our email blast so that we could give them more coverage. We shifted things to Zoom. We didn't have as large of a turnout for Zoom because everyone was shifting to Zoom. But I continued to reach out to our members saying, what can we do? How can we help? And I do believe that that made a huge difference. And we have a digital chamber guide where, like other chambers, our guide is digital. It's not the old, how do I get rid of these directory? Nobody looks at it. It's interactive. It has videos. It has links to your, you get write-ups with your ad. You get all of those things. And so we pushed that out. We continued our social media presence and our email blasts. And we did the Zoom things. And we had guest speakers that came in. And we continued to do what we could do to offer them as much out there as we could. And it has definitely paid off. I am humbled and excited because we not only brought back all of our partners, we brought 7 new partners in this year. And that to me is unbelievably exciting because it just shows that we are not thinking inside that box, and we are still helping our members. And our advertisers and our digital guide came back, and we really were able to pull everything and move it in the right direction. And we just had our Mactoberfest, and even though it was an in-person thing, but we helped 20 vendors, 8 chefs, which have locations, and our sponsors to be heard and seen. So about 35 businesses were really helped in that Mactoberfest throughout all of the advertising.
So Tracey, I'm going to pause you there because I think a lot of people listening probably didn't catch that Mactoberfest. So why don't you tell them a little bit about the event that you're talking about and what it is and how that helped the businesses that participated?
All right, so Mactoberfest, this is our 2nd year. It is a mac and cheese competition. We get our local chefs to make their very best mac and cheese, and then guests that buy a ticket come in and they're able to taste the mac and cheese and vote their favorite. The winner gets a very large trophy and $500 cash, and also a full page in our digital guide, and of course all kinds of promotion up to it. So typically, like last year was our first one, we did it at one location. We had the chefs all around a big pavilion, and we had everybody kind of spread out in one location. Well, we knew that we wouldn't be able to do that this year due to COVID. So I came up with the idea of making it a road trip. So there were 8 locations, a chef at each location, 2 vendors, and a sponsor if they wanted to be there set up. So when you got there, you got to taste the mac and cheese. If you visited the vendor, you got your vendor card stamped, and therefore you could win up to $250 in cash. And you learned a little bit more about the vendors, and then you got in your car and you moved around, and we had chefs in Federalsburg, Greensboro, Denton, Ridgely, and Preston. And so people got to see all kinds of different wonderful things in our county. They got to drive around, taste delicious mac and cheese, see some cool vendors. The train station in Ridgely was open. There was a lot of fun things. And so it helped all of those businesses, including our sponsors, and everybody had a really good time. They had a little lanyard that they wore that showed that they were a part of the road trip. And we had a digital map that included our sponsors. A video for one of our sponsors was on the digital map. So we did everything we could to make it digital and easy. And it was just a super Friday night, Saturday adventure.
So let's look at that, because that to me is such a classic and unique way of turning networking into an event, right? You're not in some boring location or just simply sitting on Zoom, right? You're moving around the county. And by the way, these are county chambers of commerce, right? These aren't, it's not like you sit in the one little spot you're in and that's it. So it's so interesting to me that you did that. They're moving all over the county. They're going to different places. It's an event. So it's both, it's fun, it's leisure. It's not a forced networking kind of opportunity. That sort of unique thinking is absolutely essential, I believe, for the promotion of local business sustainability. But I'm going to shift a little bit of gears here, because you said a question back that intrigued me also, and that I know you had a program on that is something that is very near and dear to me. And that is, you talked about taking the standard education model, because chambers like to do that. They like to have a member come and say, okay, I'm going to talk at lunch to other members about marketing or how to use LinkedIn. And so there's this sort of top level, very quick education component to what happens a lot. But you've taken that another step, and you've created an actual program for chamber members that's educational in how to better run their businesses, what information they need to know. So talk about that a little bit.
Yeah. So for 2020, we developed this Small Business Academy. And the idea for that was to get the leaders to bring in not only our new members, but our small businesses and large. For the large businesses, my concept was, hey, you may know all of these things that we're teaching, but maybe you have some people on your team that you want to rise up and you want them to learn. And so they can be a part of this and kind of be integral in learning more about what the small businesses are dealing with and what they're learning in this process. So it's kind of a twofold, right? You can send, as long as you have, or you're a member, anyone on your team can join us. There was no cost for this event. It was in the morning, and we had coffee and yogurts and things like that. And we began in person, obviously. And we started with SCORE, because SCORE really sits down and gives you, you have a plan. What is your business plan? And so, and they're a nice organization. They're always a member of our chamber. And then we move into financial. We have networking teaching, people teaching really truly how to network, not what, hey, here's my card. That's not it. It's an in-depth networking class. So they really truly understand that when they are spending time networking, it's of value to them, not just passing cards around. And we talked about the financial part. How can they make and build business credit? Things like that. Digital marketing, legal. When do you need to have an attorney involved in your business to protect you? Do you have the things that you need? And so it's a systematic, in place class situation, and they can pick and choose which ones they want to come to. But I highly recommend they join all of them, because one, they're going to network with newer businesses in the area, and that's always a good thing. They're going to get to learn who they are, maybe partner up. I talk a lot about pop-up businesses. I really believe those are value. And if you partner up with this store that doesn't compete with that one, and you pop up in their store, well, that's a great thing. Plus, they learn that they meet the teachers, they meet these leaders that are exemplary in their career or whatever they're doing, because we don't just pick anyone. We ask specific people that have the credentials of being a really good in their field. And so that's the Small Business Academy. It's extremely exciting because it's free to members. If you're a chamber member, you can jump in and join. And that's the idea. We're trying to, for your membership, give you as much as we can. Period, the end. Doesn't matter if you're a nonprofit or you're 500 employees. We want you to get as much in your membership as you can every single year. Because when you grow, then maybe you'll partner with us when the time is right. And you grew hopefully because of something that we were able to help you do.
Well said, Tracey. Thank you for all of that. Patrick, why don't you wind it up for those listening and watching? Why join a local chamber? What you should expect from your chamber, and what can we take away from the conversation today?
So first of all, thank you, Tracey, because you did a really good job, I think, of sort of illuminating a lot of the concepts that we've been pushing and showed why they are valid for a chamber to pursue. I think the how I will end this is you've heard plenty there about what a functional chamber is doing and how successful it is. I am working with a bunch of chambers. I sit on the board of a chamber right now, and across the country, I think 25% was the number I was given most recently. 25% of chambers have closed down. Okay. The COVID situation, the recession, et cetera, has impacted chambers also. The chamber that I sit on the board of is a very active chamber. It is trying very hard to keep itself going and all, but it's struggling to maintain its membership levels. I think the proof of everything that Tracey told us today is in her numbers. She didn't just keep her sponsors; she got 7 new sponsors. Right? She didn't just hold events; she innovated events and had very exciting events that were better than the year before, where there was no COVID. So, if we're looking at a proof around this, to me, the Caroline County Chamber and Tracey's efforts are absolutely that proof. It does work, and this is what you should expect from your chamber. When things are happening like COVID, the chamber needs to lead, be innovative, show the way, help everybody, mitigate the damage, and work through this. And so I commend you, Tracey. I commend the Caroline County Chamber, and I think this was a great podcast. Thank you very much.
Thank you all, and we'll see you next time on Reigniting Small Business. Tracey, did you want to say goodbye to the listening audience?
Yes, thank you so much. Goodbye. Thank you for having me. I look forward to working with you guys in the future.
Us as well.
Bye.
Take care, everyone. See you next time on Reigniting Small Business.